Well,
And again, they need to go back and look at all the things that they got wrong. You realize that they're underestimating Medicaid spending by 20%. They should look back at all the things they got wrong and explain what they're going to do to get it right in the future and to do a better job. And if they do that, we'll take them more seriously. But right now, I don't think any serious thinker could take them seriously because they've been so wrong for so long. Even back, if you go back to when President Obama passed Obamacare, they got every single number there wrong about how many people would get private insurance and how few people would get Medicaid and so on. And so their record in this modeling space is about as bad as it's possible to be. In fact, you could kind of roll the roulette wheel and come up with a better set of numbers, a better track record history than CBO.
That's Director of the National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, on CBS's Face the Nation, politely body-slamming Margaret Brennan's smug stand-in and the liberal economist's fear-mongering about President Trump's big beautiful bill being signed into law. Welcome to Nerk News, I'm Nerkish, and it looks like Kevin Hassett just turned Face the Nation into Face the Floor. Because when the media trots out their usual doomsday talking points, Hassett brings receipts and a calm smile that makes their head spin. You know, it's not every day you see a Trump economist roast the CBO, debunk Medicaid lies, and explain how 3% growth pays for everything. I mean, here's Hassett breaking down why the establishment's fake deficit panic doesn't hold up under real math.
and there's a consensus that this bill adds tremendously to the deficit. I know that you are so familiar with these numbers. The Yale Budget Lab estimates it will add $3 trillion to the debt. The Tax Foundation says this tax portion of the bill could also add $3 trillion to the deficit. I know that the administration says the bill will actually shrink the deficit by $1.5 trillion. Help me understand why there is such a drastic difference between your number and all those others.
Well, first of all, let's remember that science is not democracy. Truth is not democracy. Our estimates are based on modeling that we used last time when I was chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors to say what would happen if we had a bill, how much growth we would get. And we said, and we were criticized soundly, that we would get 3% growth. And we even had the really technical macroeconomic models that said that we would get 3% growth. We run the same models through this tax bill. It's even better. And what we're seeing is that if you get 3% growth again, then that's $4 trillion more in revenue than the CBO and these other bodies are giving us credit for. They have been wrong in the past, and they're being wrong again in our belief. But the thing that disappoints me is that if I put out a model and I say, hey, here's what's going to happen, we're going to get 3% growth, and then it turns out it's 1.5% growth, then as an academic economist, as a scientist, then it's my duty to say, what did I get wrong? What did my model miss? These people aren't doing that. And that's the thing that I find disappointing, because we put peer-reviewed academic stuff on the table, said we're going to get that 3% growth, and then we got it right last time, and we believe we're going to get it right this time. But if you think that 1.8% growth is what's going to happen over the next 10 years, then you should agree with the CBO number. But there's another part of the CBO number that you need to worry about, and that is that if we don't pass the bill, that it's the biggest tax hike in history. And with that big tax hike, then of course we would have a recession. The CEA says that we'd have about a 4% drop in GDP and lose 9 million jobs. If we had a 4% drop in GDP and we lost 9 million jobs, what would happen to the deficit? And so I don't think that the CBO has a very strong record. I don't think that these places have a very strong record. And what they need to do is get back to the basics of looking at macroeconomic models. There's a really famous macroeconomist at Harvard named Jim Stock. They should go back and read everything Jim Stock has written for the last 15 years and fold those into their models, and then maybe we could talk.
I mean, this is what you get when you send an actual economist into the lion's den. Hassett calmly lays out how the same models he used as chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors show even better results under this new bill. You know, the crooked budget office and their media cheerleaders claim it'll blow up the deficit, but they're ignoring $4 trillion in extra revenue from just 3% growth. This isn't some pipe dream. It's based on models that already proved accurate under Trump. The left's fake math isn't about economics, it's about sabotage. And Hassett just shredded their entire argument with one calm explanation. Here he is dismantling the Medicaid hysteria that Democrats keep peddling like it's gospel.
I want to talk to you, Kevin, about another number that I know you and the president disagree with, but that Democrats and many Republicans are worried about, and that's the CBO's projection that as many as 12 million Americans could lose Medicaid coverage because of this law.
Let's unbundle that a little bit, because first on the CBO coverage, so what are we doing? So what we're doing is we're asking for a work requirement, but the work requirement is that you need to be looking for work or even doing volunteer work, and you don't need to do it until your kids are 14 or older. And so the idea that that's going to cause a massive hemorrhaging in availability of insurance doesn't make a lot of sense to us. And then if you look at the CBO numbers, if you look at the big numbers, they say that people are going to lose insurance. About 5 million of those are people who have other insurance. They're people who have 2 types of insurance, and so therefore if they lose one, they're still insured. And so the CBO numbers on that side don't make any sense to us at all. But on the other side, go back to 2017 when we had work requirements for Obamacare. They said that we'd lose about 4 million insured between 2017 and 2019, and about double that over the next 10 years. And in fact, the number of insured went up quite a bit, by more than 10 million over those 2 years, because the bottom line is the best way to get insurance is to get a job. And we've got a big, beautiful bill that's going to create a lot of job creation and a lot of insurance, and the CBO is just not accounting for that.
You know, it's amazing how quickly common sense becomes controversial when it threatens Democrat fear narratives. Hassett explains that Medicaid work requirements don't kick people off. They just expect able-bodied adults to look for work or volunteer. That's it. And suddenly the left cries genocide. I mean, the bill saves $1.7 trillion by cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, not coverage for Americans who actually need it. But CBS clutches its pearls because it turns out accountability works. Here's Hassett calling out the biggest scam of all, the fake math behind enhanced subsidies.
Kevin, what about the enhanced subsidies? That doesn't sound like the waste, fraud, and abuse that I know you and the president have talked about eliminating. That just sounds like people who cannot afford coverage, and now it's going to be even more so with these subsidies gone.
Well, if you're looking at the change in the tax on the providers, which is something that has been a key talking point for the Democrats. They say that that's going to close down rural hospitals. What has happened is that rather than let the states have this game where they give $1 to a hospital, and then the federal government matches the dollar, and then the state taxes some of the dollar away. In other words, that we have an agreement with the states that they're going to match, but then they have this trick where they tax the hospitals after they give them the money, so really it's the federal government giving them the money. And that's why we've been overspending Medicaid by 20% since this trick started happening. And so what we've done is that we've put a haircut on that, but we've also put $50 billion into a trust fund to make sure that the rural hospitals are there to treat the sick. And so I think this is a prudent reform. It's sound budgetary politics, and I think that nobody's going to lose their insurance.
I mean, this is classic. They pump up short-term subsidy numbers, bury the long-term cost, and then cry foul when Trump's team fixes it. Hassett pulls back the curtain on how enhanced subsidies were sold to the public like a freebie, when in reality it's a ticking budget bomb. You know, these aren't savings, they're illusions built to score headlines. The big beautiful bill doesn't just call that out, it fixes it, while cutting taxes, boosting growth, and putting money back in people's pockets. The establishment hates it because it works. Hassett made that crystal clear. But let me know what you think. Did Hassett just give the most effective takedown of liberal economic lies we've seen in years? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. That stuff really does help us out. Until then, this has been Nerk News. Thanks for watching. Bye.